what are the geopolitics and body politics of knowledge of who defines democracy? And it's also a historical question, because we need to also historicize the question. I'm talking about a foundational moment with 1492. At that moment, you have the formation at a global scale of a new historical system with Europe at the center. That new historical system was formed with the European colonial expansion in the south of Spain and the European colonial expansion in the Americas. If you examine carefully, you have in 1492 the final conquest of Islamic Europe, that is Al-Andalus, by the Catholic monarchy in Spain. And you have, on the other hand, the same year, and this is not accidental, it was planned this way, the same year you have the expansion and colonization of the Americas. At that moment, you have the formation at a global scale of a new international division of labor, in which you have the formation of core central countries and peripheral regions. With the colonization of the Americas and of south of Europe, Al-Andalus, you have then, at the same time that you have a new international division of labor, you have a new system of social classification of the population of the world. That system of social classification is a racial system of classification, in which the people who are classified as being non-Western, non-European, are considered inferior beings below the line of the human. And people who happen to be from Western European origin are considered superior beings. The first moment of this debate, or of this question about humanity of other people in the 16th century, although it was a modern debate, because this kind of debate did not exist before 1492 anywhere else in the world, that doesn't mean there was no conflict or no domination or exploitation before, but there were social systems using other forms of classification very different from this one. And the ones that we live today are coming from the history of post-1492. That's why I'm going to that history and not to other kind of histories, okay? The one forming after 1492, at the first moment of European colonial expansion, was debated on theological language. So the first moment was the question if indigenous people in America have a soul or not. The question about having a soul or not is a question about the human. It's a question about the humanity of the people that the Spaniards encounter in the Americas. This question was debated between 1492 and 1552. There was a huge debate going on in Spain and in other parts of Europe about who are these people. At that moment, in the Christian imaginary of the time, people who were considered human were classified along the lines of people who have God or have religion. And so at that moment, the Christian imaginary of the time, people could have a God or the wrong God, or or gods in plural. It might be the wrong God, we might kill each other, but the humanity of the other was not at stake. That is, humans have gods. You might have the wrong one. We might kill each other about it, okay? But you are a human, okay? That question of the humanity of the other was not there before 1492. But after 1492, this became a central question, because one of the first things that Columbus wrote in his diary when he stepped out of the boat was immediately to ask, to say, these people, he make a statement, these are people without religion. Now, if you think about this question from the 21st century, and you do a kind of extrapolation of the common sense of today to that statement of Columbus, you might think that he's saying there, well, these people are atheists. But that was not the meaning of Columbus when he put that in writing. Because at the time, the question there was not about atheism like you have today. When he put there, these are, my God, these are people without religion, it meant something different at the time. It meant that we haven't seen any human without religion. And now he stepped out of the boat 1 hour or less than an hour, he comes back and he already assumed, because he didn't see any sign of any kind of religious symbol that Christian imaginary of the time will identify as religion symbol. You see, so he thought these people have no religion. The question of having religion or no religion is a question about the human. These are like cows, like horses, that these are people without a soul. So not having a religion means you're not a human. And not being a human means you have no soul. And so this was the debate in the first 50 years of European colonial expansion to the Americas. It was, are these people with a soul or not? That debate was finally, captured in the famous debate of the School of Valladolid. In Valladolid, the School of Salamanca, between Gines Sepúlveda and Bartolomé de las Casas. I don't know how much you know about this debate. It's a fundamental debate for European history. If you don't know this debate, you should know about it, because we are still living under the premises of this debate in our imaginary. Gines Sepúlveda, this was of course a theological debate, but it was a modern debate, because it was a modern debate disguised as theological, because the authority of knowledge in the 16th century was based on theology and the church. And therefore, the Spanish Empire delegated the decision-making about these questions in the church. And so, Gines Sepúlveda, who was a theologian, a priest, in the church, and Bartolomé de las Casas, too, they were debating this question. Gines Sepúlveda had the position that, well, these people have no soul, so they are like horses and like animals, and therefore it's not a sin in the eyes of God to enslave them. While they were debating this, they already have enslaved indigenous people in the Americas. They were already enslaved. But there was this debate going on, because part of what happened also was that with slavery of these people in the Americas, a lot of them were dying very fast. And so the Spanish Empire was facing a problem, which is, okay, who's going to do this work there? And so the debate was, okay, are we committing a sin in the eyes of God by enslaving them? That is, these people might have a soul, and maybe it's a sin in the eyes of God to enslave them? Or they're just animals, like horses, like monkeys, and it's not any sin in the eyes of God if you incorporate a horse in the process of production. You see, that was the debate. It was a racist debate, okay? Just the question if they are humans or, if they have a soul or not, it's already a racist debate. So, Las Casas was debating and saying, well, they have a soul, they just have a childish evolution, they are a very childish stage, and they are barbarians, and what we need to do is Christianize them. So we shouldn't enslave them, we should just Christianize them. And so this was the debate. This debate, if you look at this debate carefully, and look at the development of this debate over the next 300 years, you could see how, when the authority of knowledge shift from theology and the church to universities and science in the 19th century, you have the secularization of this debate now in scientificist terms. So let's take Sepúlveda's position. These are people without soul, therefore they're animals. That was the language of the 16th century. In the 19th century, this language secularized in scientificist rhetoric and became a question not about the lack of a soul, but the lack of a DNA and the genetics of making them human. And therefore, they're non-humans. Now, it's not because they don't have a soul, but because they don't have the genes, the proper genetics. Okay? The Las Casas position, which was a position about, okay, these people have a soul, but they are in a very, backward stage, and therefore what we need to do is to Christianize them, to uplift them, you see, to a higher stage from their barbarianism. That in the 19th century was secularized as in a different rhetoric. That is, these people are primitive in a backward culture that need to be civilized. Okay? So here you have the two lines that have of types of racism that have evolved over the next 500 years in this Eurocentric global system between biological forms of racism, now talking with modern time terms, and cultural forms of racism. These two forms has coexisted over time, have also been played out in complex ways in different empires and different colonial histories, etc. I cannot go into the details now, but keep in mind that these are the two hegemonic discourses used in the West in terms of racist discourses. The biological line from Sepúlveda to scientific racism in the 19th century, and the Las Casas line, of culturalist racism, that goes from Las Casas all the way to 19th century to contemporary forms. Now, this structure of Europe becoming the center of this new global system emerging after 1492 have different transformations over time, because the Iberian Peninsula in the 16th century was the core of this new world system. But then in the 17th century, with the 30-year war between the Dutch and the Spaniards were displaced as center of the system, and the Dutch became the new center. Okay, then you have later on new struggles. Now with the Dutch in the 17th century, mid-17th century, the center of the system shifted to northwestern Europe. Okay, and there you have with the Dutch now the formation with the Treaty of Westphalia, the formation also of a political system that is going to be fundamental for the understanding of the kind of questions we're raising today. The Westphalia Treaty was a treaty about the sovereignty, the recognition of sovereignty between the European empires. Up till that time, there were struggles and chiefs and things, but there was no recognition of the sovereignty. And the question of sovereignty was not so much inside Europe, it was about the colonial territories. That is, if I go and put my flag there, in an island in the Caribbean, okay, I want to make sure that the other empires understand that that's my territory and respect that. And so the whole Westphalia Treaty was founded on colonialism and slavery, because it was a negotiation between the empires about the mutual recognition of the sovereignty, but that sovereignty was centered not only in terms of European territories, but fundamentally about the colonies outside Europe, where each empire will put the flag and how much recognition they will get from the other empires in terms of the control of those territories and the enslavement of the people in those territories and the Atlantic captive trade of Africans sent to the Americas as slaves. Now, I'm saying this because you have, through colonialism and through slavery, you have the foundations of how this Eurocentric global system formed in 1492 was formed on the shoulders as an infrastructure of the colonial. It was the colonialism and slavery was the infrastructure through which state formation in Europe was done. Then with the so-called Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, I'm saying so-called because that's another mythology of Eurocentric history that we can discuss later. The so-called Industrial Revolution was founded on the enslavement and plundering of the colonies outside Europe. And then you have the Berlin Scramble of Africa, okay, which, because the system was expanding to many territories, finally there was Africa there as a remaining frontier, okay, where the Europeans got together here in Berlin and divided the territory of Africa among themselves. And remember that Bismarck put a cake in the celebration and divided the pieces of the cake. That was a symbolic act about seeing Africa as a cake. They were cut in pieces. So the European industrialization, that is the wealth of Europe, and the European political system, that is the political rights and recognition of citizenship rights and all of this, were founded on slavery, colonialism, and racism. So this question, you cannot delink the discussions, contemporary discussions about questions of democracy from this foundation, okay, of the system we live today. Now, the question of this system that I've been describing very briefly has an important division that has to do with the expulsion to what Frantz Fanon called the zone of non-being of the majority of the population of the world. Okay? And how in this zone that he calls the zone of non-being, you have an abyssal line, like Boaventura de Sousa Santos will call an abyssal line, between the people living above the line of the human, that is, people whose humanity is recognized, and people being below the line of the human, people whose humanity is not recognized. This division is not only economic and political, but epistemological. That is, the question of who makes democracy, okay, and who defines what is democracy, and etc., is a question that is already founded on the presupposition that there is a group of people whose epistemology is superior, and groups of people, majority of the population of the world, whose epistemology is considered inferior. This is what I'm going to call epistemic racism, sexism. Why I'm using the term epistemic racism, sexism? Because in this Western tradition of thought coming out of this historical system that I've been describing, you have the privilege of Western men as having the epistemic privilege to produce knowledge that is supposed to be universal and is supposed to be truthful and supposed to be scientifically valid to be applied elsewhere. If you examine the Westernized university, in the Westernized university, in the canon of thought of the disciplines, without exception, the people you see there privileged as the main thinkers of the disciplines that we all have to study in these Westernized Eurocentric universities, is people, theoreticians, coming from 5 countries: Italy, France, Germany, England, and the USA. 5 countries. These are the theoreticians that we recognize in the Westernized university as social scientific theory. And that is legitimate, they have the legitimation to have produced, this is what we recognize as critical theory, okay? That is supposed to be applicable everywhere else in the world. And that is supposed to produce the superior knowledge, okay? Epistemically superior knowledge over the rest. The rest of the knowledges and critical thinking from other parts of the world are considered inferior. The thinking of women, be that Western or not Western, doesn't matter, is out of the conversation. They are completely out of this canon of thought, with exceptional people here and there that might put in the bibliography of the course women critical thinkers, no, feminist thinkers, etc. That's exceptional. If you think, I'm talking about it as a trend. I'm not talking absolutist term. I'm talking as a trend. This is the trend, the hegemonic trend. Of course, there are individuals here and there in those disciplines that are doing exception to the rule, but this is the rule. This is the canon of thought of Western university. Women are out, and Western and non-Western people are out. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. If you're non-Western, you're out of the conversation. So that's why I'm saying the foundation that I've been describing as a racist, a sexist foundation that you see in this Western-centered system that I've been describing, it has an epistemological, racist, sexist foundation too, where if you think about these 5 countries, this is only 12% of the population of the world. So the social historical experience of 12% of the population of the world is supposed to develop the conceptual categories and theories that are going to account for the other 88% of the world. Okay? This is the pretension. Now, when you put it this way, you see how provincial this kind of pretension is. Because you cannot tell me that the social historical experience of 80% of humanity living in the zone of non-being is accounted in those theories that are the theories produced from the social historical experience of 12% of the world. You cannot tell me that. This is unacceptable, especially if you think about this cleavage of zone of being, non-being that was officially institutionalized in the Treaty of Westphalia. Okay? And then the question is, if you think more carefully and more in detail, we're not talking about 12% of the population of the world. We're talking about 6%, because the women in those 5 countries are not included. The critical thinking of the women of those 5 countries are out too. So we're talking about 6% of the population of the world, the social historical experience of 6% of the population of the world. This 6% of Western males living in the zone of being, okay, above the line of the human, are going to give us the theory and critical tools to understand the experience of everybody else. This is really, I would say, to say the least, arrogant. This is imperialistic. This is colonialist. This is racist. This is sexist. And the racism, sexism go together. You cannot delink it. Okay? They go together. And so the question about who defines democracy is a very fundamental question. Because then if we think about this epistemic sexist, racist tradition, and we think that the theoreticians of democracy, the people who have defined democracy for us, is people coming, what we call democracy in the West, is fundamentally these white males from these 5 countries, okay? Then we have a problem here, a serious and fundamental problem, because we have a Eurocentric fundamentalism defining for the rest of the world what is democracy and what is not considered democracy, what is legitimate democracy and what is not legitimate democracy, okay? And then if you add to that the fact that the way in this system they deal with difference is by, first, they define what is better for you, because see, these people in the zone of being, these males who have taken in their hands the notion that they're superior to the rest, they think not only they're superior in terms of their bodies, socially speaking and culturally speaking and economic speaking, but also epistemically speaking. And so if they know what is better for you, see, they know what is better for you, there is no dialogue, there is a monologue. There is no interepistemic conversations. If I think that my knowledge is superior to you, then I know what is better for you. You see? And if I know what is better for you, then whatever you say about what are your needs and what are your problems, what are your questions, how you answer them, is irrelevant. Because I know what is better for you. I know what democracy is. You don't know what democracy is. My epistemology is superior to you. Yours is inferior. So if I try to persuade you. If you're not convinced by persuasion, then I will have to use the weapons. So I can teach you democracy by force. I need to save you from yourself. Because you are in a very backward stage, and your epistemology is not at the level to be able for you to define for yourself what is good for you. I know what is better for you. So we went from 16th century Christianize or I kill you, because if I know what is better for you, and you're not understanding what I'm telling you, and I need to kill you to save your soul, I'll kill you to save your soul. Because I have to save you from yourself. You see? And so it becomes tautological. There you have the seeds of genocide and epistemicide going together. Okay? Epistemicide happens from the 16th century. The foundation of epistemic sexism and racism is related not only with the colonization of indigenous people and Africans in the Americas in the 16th century, but also the extermination of millions of women in Europe in the 16th century. The two processes went together, accused of being witches, burned alive of being witches. And the question there was an epistemological clash, because these women had knowledges that were not acceptable for the powers that be of the time. And they were persecuted and accused of witches and burned alive. So this epistemic sexism and racism had as a foundation the genocide and epistemicide in the Americas in the 16th century, as well as the genocide and epistemicide of women in Europe in the 16th century. The two processes happen at the same time. And this is an important moment to understand what happened with the foundation of the institutions of Westphalia Treaty that is founded on the basis of these two processes, which is patriarchal and colonial at the same time, racist and sexist at the same time. And so you have the hegemony of Western male elites, okay, at a world scale, with the exclusion of women, Western or non-Western, and the exclusion of non-Western male and women. So here you have the foundation of the imperialist system that Hannah Arendt is talking about. And then you have there, I would say, an epistemology that is a tautological epistemology, because then with that epistemology you go from Christianize or I kill you in the 16th century to civilize or I kill you in the 19th century, okay, to develop or I kill you in the 20th century, to democratize or I kill you in the 21st century. So we go with weapons to teach democracy, okay? Okay, because these are, I know better than you, my epistemology is superior, and I know better what is best for you. And if I have to use the weapons, I'm justified in using them because you are in a backward stage related to me, because you are inferior to me, epistemologically speaking, and therefore, if you don't understand by persuasion, I will have to use the force, okay? This is the world we're living. Now, I don't think we're going that far with that, and I think the moment we're living today is an example of that we haven't gone that far with that. All these multiple crises we're going through are leading nowhere. But the problem here is then, whose democracy? That is the foundation of the institutional systems of state formation of the West is based on this foundation of patriarchal, colonial, racist, sexist system, okay? Then we need to question who has defined democracy, on which terms, okay? And then we need to question the language of inclusion and exclusion. Because the language of inclusion exclusion, I would say, is trapped in the same epistemology. Why? Because the language of exclusion inclusion is already presupposing a definition of something you already are excluded or included that haven't been questioned yet. That is, let's take a philosopher like Habermas, because we're in Germany. We can take anybody else in other places, but we're in Germany, we can discuss Habermas here. And probably it's more familiar to you than if I take other authors, but because it's the same thing. For Habermas, liberal democracy become like a kind of Hegelian end of history. Liberal democracy is considered as the superior democratic system existing in the world. Okay? As if there are no other forms of democracy available in the world, as if there's no other epistemologies. Okay? So he defines this, this is democracy, liberal democracy, he defends it, fine. But then the question for him is including the others into the democratic system. That is extending modernity, the Eurocentric modernity, to the rest of the world. That's the solution. He thinks we haven't had enough modernity, and what we need to do is to bring more modernity to the world. Well, from a different geopolitics of knowledge, we have enough modernity. We know what modernity is, and we know the nightmare of modernity. The fact that you live in the zone of being, you might be living some of the good aspects of modernity, but what about the people living on the other side of the abyssal line, okay, who has been living in that same modernity that is always colonial from the 16th century on? Okay, what about those people who are majority of humanity? So there is no question about, okay, what kind of democracy would you like or would you defend or would you think about? That's not the question. The question is, here is democracy, defined a priori by a Western man, and all I want to do is including you to this one. I haven't asked you if you want to be included in that one, because that question is irrelevant if you depart from epistemic racism, sexism. It's irrelevant because I know what is better for you. This is the best one. My epistemology is better and superior than yours. Yours is inferior. So I want to include you in this one. So the moment you pose the problem this way, you are already in a colonial project, because you haven't asked the previous question, which is, do you want to be included in this democracy, or do you have another concept of democracy? And then let's have a horizontal conversation about what kind of democracy we want or we can build to live together. Okay, that question is never asked, because democracy is already a priori and previously defined.
We do.
Okay, I'm glad you're doing it, but I'm saying most of these Western-made philosophers is a question that is never asked, because they already have defined it. And they have a traditional thought of these Western males that they claim to be a universal way of and they claim this is the best thing, and they never situate their knowledge. They always think as if their knowledge have no particularity. As if they were not thinking from a body and from a place in the geopolitics of knowledge and in the power relations of the world. As if they were thinking from the point of view of all particularities. Now, this is a secularization of the God-I view. Because if I think from the point of view of all particularities, then I have replaced myself. I put myself in the place of God. Okay? I have just secularized God into the Western man. Now, if I recognize that I'm human, and as a human I'm finite, and I will never replace God, and I cannot represent the point of view of all points of view, then we need to acknowledge that we have situated knowledges. And then we need to be honest about it. Where are we thinking from? From which location, from which body, from which geopolitics of knowledge? And then situate our knowledge in relation to that. Okay? So as a Puerto Rican in the United States, colonized by the US empire, I can tell you that we were never asked in Puerto Rico about what kind of democracy we want. We were never asked in Puerto Rico if we want to be citizens of the US or not. We were never asked in Puerto Rico if we want to be part of the US. These were acts of force. Okay? And this is how the modern colonial world was built. And then once it's built and institutionalized, then you forget how it was built. You see? And then you forget from the point of view of the zone of being, you become blind to the process of colonization has been going on. And then it continues into the present, and you forget that those people have epistemology, have ways of being and seeing and thinking, okay, that we never have asked them what exactly you think of your situation, what do you want to build as a future, etc. We are always defining for the rest what is better for them. This is what I will call Eurocentric fundamentalism. And so I would like to go beyond the inclusion-exclusion conversation, because the moment you enter into inclusion-exclusion, then this kind of language is trapped into included to what? We take for granted what are we including to, you see? And then we depart from there to say, okay, included, excluded, without questioning, okay, included to what? That is the institutional system that have been put in place that is already sexist, racist, capitalist, etc. Okay, which we have to put in question. Okay, and then from there, we can depart as equals in a horizontal way to have interepistemic dialogues about about the political utopias. Because that's also another problem. This problem I'm describing is not a problem of the right-wingers. This is also a problem of the westernized left that reproduce the same problems that I'm criticizing here. The same epistemic racism, sexism, okay, with a progressive face and smile. Okay? And so the utopistics, the utopias of the future, have to depart from the acknowledgement of epistemic diversity and from breaking away from this hierarchical, vertical way of thinking where, the Western man now of the left, okay, defines for the rest what is good for you as a global colonial define. And now instead of having Rousseau or instead of having Hegel, or Habermas, now you have Toni Negri, Foucault, and then we're trapped in the same place. No woman, be that Western or non-Western, no man from the non-Western world. And there is a lot of critical thinking from those body politics of knowledge and from those geopolitics of knowledge. A lot. But it's never part of the canon of the Eurocentric University. It's never part of the conversation in most of the West. These are invisibilized, these are inferiorized as knowledges, okay? And there is a whole systematic institutional system to keep it that way. It's not easy to get into spaces where your voices are going to be heard with respect as an equal and enter into dialogue. What you have is a monologue of the West defining for the rest, Western man defining for the rest. We're not going anywhere with that. I'm going to stop here. Thank you.